I want to say hello and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Will Mitchell, and I'm the Director of Advancement here at Pomfret. And I'm also a proud Pomfret alumnus from the class of 1984 and was thrilled to return to Pomfret this summer to join Tim Richards' team. I fondly recall attending Pomfret's holiday gathering in New York City last year and reconnecting with and meeting so many alumni and parents. We realize this webinar cannot replace the warmth and good cheer of our traditional holiday gatherings, but we are no less grateful to you for joining us this evening to hear from Tim and enjoy our common connection to and love for Pomfret. So it's my pleasure now to introduce you to our moderator, Laura Keeler Purse, class of 2003. Laura is the president of the Pomfret Alumni Association, which is sponsoring tonight's event. She lives in Boston with her husband, Vassar, who is the associate director of advancement at Pomfret. Laura, over to you.
Thanks, Will. It's really exciting to be with all of you this evening. And while we can't be at what would arguably be one of my favorite evenings of the year, how cool is it that we all get to gather via Zoom together? So there's a silver lining to all of this. This evening's TimTalk, I'm particularly excited about. This is our first TimTalk that has been an alumni sort of centric TimTalk, and I'm really excited about getting to hear from Tim and then getting to hear your questions for Tim. So it's meant to be an informal town hall style hour that we are together. Tim is going to start by kicking us off with some introductory remarks, and then he's going to open up the floor to questions. And that Q&A box on your screen is available to you throughout the whole session. So I hope you will use it, and I encourage you to use it, and we'll make sure to answer as many of your questions as we can. One sort of housekeeping thing to note is if you experience any technical difficulties during our hour together, please email techsupport@pomfret.org with your name, your phone number, and a description of the issue. And someone from the support team will get right back to you and make sure that they can figure out your issue and you can participate. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Tim to get us started. So thank you, Tim, for sharing with us what's going on at Pomfret.
Great, and thank you, Laura and Will, for your introduction, and good evening to everyone. Thank you for tuning in this evening. I hope you and your families are staying safe and staying well and as healthy as possible during this pandemic. I also want to very publicly thank the members of my senior administrative team who are joining us tonight, volunteering to be on this call after having spent 5 hours on the Board of Trustee call this afternoon. So I am grateful to them for joining us, and they will be, I hope, helpful in answering some questions that you may have. There is certainly a great deal to report and not much time. I recognize that the audience that is with us tonight is a fairly eclectic one, mostly alums, I understand it, some trustees and some current parents. Our current parents are probably the best informed group, and the trustees about what has been happening on campus. And I want to apologize if there's any redundancy in reports that I've given recently to them for any old news. But I do want to make sure that alums are hearing about what's been going on and what is the good news. As others, Will and Laura mentioned, this is a poor facsimile for our New York holiday reception, which is always a tremendously fun event. But I guess the positive news, the upside, is that folks from beyond the greater New York City metropolitan area are able to join us for this update tonight. Suffice it to say, this is not how I would have foreseen my 10th year at the helm of Pomfret going. It has been anything but a normal year. We had a really successful opening to the school year, and it took a great deal of planning in the summer. I won't go back to those in sort of crazy busy days of the summer, except for to pay my compliments to everyone at Pomfret, particularly the senior administrative team and the faculty for getting ready for this new adventure, building off of the lessons that we learned last spring in distance learning. Now, the plan that we developed and published in early August was one that we knew we would be modifying along the way, and we did. We opened as a school of 350 students, with approximately 80 of those students being distance learning students, the vast majority of them being international students. And then halfway through the term, we had a second re-entry point where we allowed students to come back, and we had 23 students who returned and rejoined us as in-person on-campus learners, and it was great to have them back. We certainly opened a campus with restrictions that were unfamiliar to one and all, certainly to the students, the mask wearing, the social distancing, the way we limited occupancy of spaces from classrooms to the dining hall to Hart Auditorium and the chapel. We opened our campus on the 24th of August, and we had students successfully on campus for 12 weeks. And when I say successfully, I mean that we had a terrific term on all fronts. And most particularly, we had a COVID-free fall. We did over 1,600 tests during the course of the fall, and did not have a single positive case on campus. So on that front, it was a very, very successful fall. And despite the many shortcomings of what we call doing school or teaching and learning during a pandemic, there were so many positive takeaways from the fall. Our student leaders were inspirational and supportive of their schoolmates, and it was on full display throughout the fall, perhaps never more so than when we all got to witness a remarkable fundraising event, a wiffle ball game that our senior class put on to raise funds for one of their classmates who is unfortunately suffering from cancer. But it was perhaps the best community event that I've seen in my 36 years as a professional, and humbling in how it spoke to this community and its values at a time when that can be a real challenge. And so there was much to celebrate. Our teachers, our faculty members opened their bag of tricks. They certainly went to school themselves to learn more about what it means to be a teacher in distance learning mode. They developed new capacities and continued to nurture, support, and challenge their students, whether that was in person, in a hybrid setting, or at a distance. And as we looked at the fall, we were, I think, understandably concerned about what the impact of all of the restrictions, what the impact of the distance learning might have on our program. And last year, we undertook a new initiative, and I'm going to ask our director of the Grauer Institute for Excellence and Innovation, Gwyneth Connell, to come in and talk a little bit about this important metric that we have incorporated at Pomfret for measuring student engagement, and just to share with you some of her thoughts about what we've seen this fall as it compares to past years, and why perhaps that's happening. So Gwyneth.
Sure, thanks, Tim. So the measurement tool that Tim's talking about is something called the Wellington Engagement Index, which I became familiar with really on my way into Pomfret, and I've may have spoken about it before at various events that you may have attended or heard about. But essentially what it does is it defines engagement as an engaging experience is one where you are challenged and where you really like it, where you're enjoying that challenge. And the more I got to know Pomfret and our students and the kind of experiences we offer here, I thought, that's a metric I want us to be paying attention to, because I've got a hunch that Pomfret School sets the conditions for engagement maybe better than any place I've ever been. And so the way it works is 6 times a year, we ask students to plot on an XY axis all 6 of their classes and their afternoon activity. So the x-axis goes from hate it to love it, and the y-axis goes from I'm not challenged to I'm very challenged. And so, oh, great, thanks, Tim. I was just about to put that up there. So last fall was the first time that we administered the Wellington Engagement Index, and we were very pleasantly surprised to see this outcome. This is every dot that was dropped by our students last fall. As you can see, 65.2% of the dots that they dropped fell in that upper right-hand quadrant. And that's what we're looking for. If something is really hard, but we hate it, that's what we call the grind. And you can see that about 17% of the dots fell in that quadrant. And I'm sure you can all remember experiences from your own high school that felt like a little bit of a grind. On the bottom half, so the experiences that are not quite so challenging. On the right hand, it's not so challenging, but I like it. We call that, that's being entertained. And then down there in the lower left hand, I don't like it, and it's not even challenging me. That's where kids are just bored. And we were pretty happy to see that less than 4% of the dots that our students dropped were falling in that quadrant. So that was our very first collection of dots last fall. And the great thing about this is that you can get whole school information in under like 3 minutes. And then, so this fall, we were worried. Here, can you back up one, Tim? So this fall, we found that our numbers actually improved. So it went from 65.2% engaged up to 65.9% engaged. So like an itty bitty shift, but we saw that those grindy experiences went down about 2%. And this was in the middle of a pandemic, when some of their teachers are running back and forth between 2 classrooms to be able to reach all their students. Some of their classmates are zooming in from all over the world. I was a little baffled when I first saw this. I had to check my slides a couple times to make sure that I got them in the right order. But when I thought about it, I thought, okay, well, this fall, we really made building relationships a learning goal. When we got here in September, there may or may not have been a couple of betting pools going on about whether we were going to make it to October. So we knew as classroom teachers, we better get in there and form relationships with these kids right out of the gate, because they could be back on Zoom in a couple weeks. We just didn't know. And I think the odds felt pretty long at that point that we would have made it to November 21st, COVID-free. So I attribute a lot of that improvement and sort of the shift into that engaged zone to the really intentional work our faculty did to build those relationships and build classroom community. And that, as we know, is the secret sauce of boarding school. That is why kids love what they're doing, is because they love the people they're doing it with. And one other thing that I wanted to show you is our distance learner responses. And you'll notice these are very few dots. I will, full disclosure, our response rate from our distance learners was much lower. And part of that is because this is a survey that we administer typically in advisory groups. And often those advisory groups are meeting when many of our distance learners, it's 2 a.m. for them. They're fast asleep, we hope. So we did not get as many responses, but the ones that we did were really like even more in that engaged quadrant. And I think for many of the kids for whom distance learning is something that really does work and that they've figured out how to navigate, I think they were really grateful for the efforts the school and their teachers were making to make it possible for them to be at Pomfret even when they couldn't be at Pomfret. So we're really encouraged by those metrics. Thanks, Tim. You are muted, Tim.
I just saw that. You can get a sense from this and from what Gwyneth shares that there are certainly, there's certainly challenges to keeping people engaged in this setting. And it's, I think, a real tribute to the faculty's commitment to that relationship building that made for such a successful fall. Gwyneth, while I have you sort of on the screen, could you take 2 minutes just to give folks an overview of the distance learning model we developed, and then perhaps share a little bit about how we've modified it for the winter?
One moment, I just have to give my daughter a kiss goodnight. She's heading upstairs. This is Juno. Mwah. Night, night, sweet girl. I'll see you in the morning.
That's a good Zoom bomb right there.
I know, seriously. Perfect timing. So, so our distance learning model, one of the things that we really grappled with as we were figuring out how to do it this fall was, how do we make sure not to lose the student-centered aspect of a Pomfret education that's so important to all of us? A lot of the technological tools that we were seeing other schools adopt kind of wholesale had to do with, oh, here's a camera that will follow the teacher around everywhere so you don't miss a word. Well, guess what? Our classes aren't really lecture-based. It's not really that important to follow the teacher all the time, because a lot of what you're doing is practicing, working with your classmates, and getting feedback. And those technological tools weren't exactly the silver bullet that they might have been if we were a more teacher-centered, lecture-based school. So some of what we tried to do was organize classes so they could be either one or the other. So in our multi-section core classes, like Humanities 1, Humanities 2, pre-calculus honors, we were able to create solely distance sections. So maybe 10, 12, 15 kids who are all learning at a distance, they're their own section, and they're having that learning experience with a teacher who has done some professional development about learning for the online space. And it also meant that the rest of the sections of that class could be entirely in person. So we ended up with about 20% of our sections of classes being those standalone distance sections. And as a result of that, about 40% of our classes were able to be entirely in person. With the exception of masks and some funky distancing stuff, it was kind of business as usual for nearly half of our classes. And disproportionately for our youngest students who might have the hardest time adapting to some of these new ways of doing things. And then in the upper grades, where you have a singleton class, electives, things like that, those we ended up having them be hybrid, with some of the students who are here in person, and then a handful who might be Zooming in from all over the world. And teachers found a lot of really different and creative ways of managing that challenge. Some of them would have the students Zoom in synchronously for the entire class period. Some would say, hey, distance kids, you do this other assignment while we're doing this thing in class, and then you Zoom in for this particular part of the lesson, or connect with your classmates synchronously later as part of your homework. So it's been kind of a mixed bag, but all of our teachers have their own superpowers. And I really wanted to make sure that every teacher had the opportunity to use every superpower at their disposal in their classroom, to make sure that the distance experience for our hybrid kids, for our all distance kids, and for our in-person kids was as close to sort of normal Pomfret as it could be.
Thanks so much, Gwyneth. And there may be questions that we can come back to when we move forward.
Right.
I wanted to quickly touch base on a handful of other topics, recognizing that we want to move to Q&A soon. Our athletic department looked a little bit different this fall, and I think likely for the first time in the school's 127 years, we did not have a single interscholastic athletic contest, either here or elsewhere, which was hard for our students. But I was impressed by the level of enthusiasm and engagement by our coaches and our players throughout the fall. We did create some flexibility to allow students to do more than one sport in the fall if they wanted to. So we adopted what we call the 4-2 model, where you could do even a varsity sport you could do for 4 days a week, and then you could choose another activity for 2 days a week. So you could be a girls varsity field hockey player 4 days a week, and then 2 days a week you could do yoga or ultimate frisbee or outdoor adventure. So that model, that variety was something that really benefited us, and something that we might be worth considering as we move forward. Right now in the state of Connecticut, if you live in the state of Connecticut, you're aware that the governor has ordered a complete stop to all team activities. We cannot have practices, we cannot have games until at least the 19th of January. And I'm not entirely optimistic given the trajectory of the virus that Governor Lamont is going to lift that edict in the middle of January. So I do worry about what the winter will hold in terms of athletics. Right now, the limit is for four athletes at a time to be participating in any specific activity, and that's incredibly limiting. I wanted to quickly touch base on the work that we've done around diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. Certainly last summer, we were challenged by our students, by our alumni, by our trustees to turn our attention to the national and even the global dialogue around social justice and racial equality. And we remain incredibly committed to doing our part. DEI work has long been a priority for us at the school, and it continues to be a priority. But it was thrust into a new place of importance this summer with the social unrest that spiked across the country. And our mission statement, our values, our vision of the graduate, and our diversity strategic plan all speak to the longstanding commitment we have to DEI work. And so if I could, I think Jillian Forg and TC Hanmer, who are co-directors of DEI, are here. And maybe Jillian and TC, you could give just a couple minutes on some of the work that we've been doing this fall, recognizing that our time is running short.
Hi, certainly. Okay, so we really have been looking this year into sort of 3 distinct areas where we can improve and enhance our DEI work. That is with the faculty, with the students, and then with our external community, the alums in particular. And so what we've really been trying to do is to introduce some new anti-bias training across the board with our faculty and with our students. We're looking forward to hopefully rolling out a community-wide anti-bias training coming up this winter, virtually, and then a little bit in person if we do return in person. Additionally, we've had several sort of catalyst conversations with our alumni body. We've brought those back to our faculty and our students, sort of looking to engage them in those conversations with our alums. So we've had 2 meetings with our alums and our students, and we've had some different sort of forums for that. Most recently, our students of color put on a Black app panel in which our students planned and ran a forum for the community on campus, as well as streaming it live to alums who wanted to participate, really just talking about the summer and the police brutality that we saw in the news, and then talking about what it was like to be a student of color on the Pomfret campus. That was really well received, and going from there, I think the students felt really motivated, really happy, really willing to sort of engage in those conversations with their peers and with others. And we're looking to continue those conversations as we head into the winter. On the faculty side, we've had 3 anti-bias trainings so far, and we're looking to have more of those as we head into the winter term. And let's see, Jillian, what am I missing?
I would mention this SEED training for faculty and senior admin.
Yes, I can talk a little bit about SEED. So Gwyneth and I are both SEED facilitators, and SEED is the the Seeking Equity and Educational Diversity. It's a national project that many schools partner with. So it's a series of intensive 3-hour seminars. We meet once a month and we discuss topics of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. I also wanted to mention, I know TC touched on faculty, students, alums, and other external constituents. We recently just had a really great session with our board. So I think the work moving from sort of these one-off, sort of ad hoc little pockets of DEI toward more sustainable, long-term, fully integrated, systemic parts of our institution. So working towards becoming fully inclusive, a true, not just anti-racist, but anti all the isms, fully inclusive, everyone feels they belong. I think that's the end goal, and maybe not just having it fall on sort of the DEI office, but seeing accountability lying with our senior admin and our board of trustees. And I'm proud to say that that sort of high level work is happening as well, not just with our students and faculty, but also with our senior admin team and trustees. So we probably can't fit everything we've been working on in one call, but TC and I are actually hoping to do another sort of update like we did in November with alums and others. So look out for that.
It's hard for me to express sufficiently my gratitude to Jillian and to TC, who are, we've done more and more quality work on DEI this year than at any time in my time at the school. And they are doing this work as co-directors on top of being full-time classroom teachers and dorm parents and coaches and advisors. Really, Jillian and TC, thank you again. The work has been terrific. I want to quickly touch on our values. It was about 10 months ago that we adopted core institutional values of community growth and integrity. And we've been able to navigate sort of the trifecta of circumstances we faced over the summer and this fall, the pandemic, social unrest, and a sort of very, very combative and divisive political campaign and election season by embracing our values. And you could see sort of all along the way how, the idea that we care for ourselves and the people around us, we come together to better address challenges. We thrive on creativity and innovation. We inspire each other with engagement, determination, and optimism. We take calculated risks and rebound from failure with renewed energy. We treat people with respect and compassion. We speak and act with sincerity, honesty, and civility. I think we did a remarkable job last year of coming up with values that really served us unbelievably well this year. And that language that we've been able to come back to has been critical to our success this year. These values have been our North Star, and they've served us incredibly well. And the values are, we posted them all over campus. And when you do get to come back to campus, I hope you'll look at how committed we are, at least visually, and certainly from a practical standpoint to the values. We had a couple of processes last year that were interrupted by COVID. We were, every year, the Board of Trustees evaluates and affirms the school's mission statement. And last year, the board decided that it was time to revisit our mission with an eye toward making it perhaps more distinctive, more authentic, and more concise. And so the board and the senior administrative team have been working on the statement this fall, and we were supposed to have had further deep conversations about it this afternoon at the board level. We did not get there. We will get there in February, so stay tuned. We also last spring were deep into the next iteration of our strategic plan, our most recent version of our strategic plan. Our old strategic plan has served us incredibly well for 7 years, but it's time for a new one. And we were just getting going, really good momentum when COVID stepped in and distracted us from that. So we've been getting back to that as a senior admin team. And again, come the new year, that will be a focus of attention. We're in a very, very strong position financially at this point. The current valuation of our endowment is the highest it's ever been at north of $63 million. The board today had further discussions. We're considering increasing our debt, taking out some money. It's a good time to borrow money to address some capital needs that we have on campus. We have not made final decisions, but certainly the pandemic has been a drag in many, many ways, but it's also produced an environment where it's highly desirable to borrow money. So we are considering that to try to address some issues that we see as of vital importance to the school right now. So, we've learned a lot from this pandemic and this time that we've had. A lot of our attention has been focused very much in the here and now. It seemed that for months and months, we were focused on what was right immediately in front of our faces, and sort of taking a long view was a luxury that we didn't have. The important, that is looking forward, what are we learning from this? What are we getting? Those important tasks were usurped or were replaced by the urgent tasks. How are we going to get people back to campus safely? How are we going to manage a campus safely? How are we going to make people feel safe and welcome and included here? Those are the urgent things. And it's just now, as we've reached a point in the year, students aren't here, things are slowing down a bit, that we're beginning to really undertake the process of digesting those lessons. What can we glean from this and what can we take as we move forward? I think it's worth noting that even as I say that, Don Gibbs, the assistant head of school, and Gwyneth, whom you just heard from, along with our director of technology, Ty Watkins, presented a session at the Association of Boarding Schools conference today about essentially lessons we've learned from COVID and what we might take forward. And we might have time to go into that a little bit more when we get back. But certainly this notion of relationship building that Gwyneth mentioned has been critical, and a reinforcement of that value in the community. We were reminded that our students learn best with us when they're in the room with our teachers, but we've also learned that they learn best when teachers get the heck out of the way, whether in person or at a distance. And so we've been better at designing for those types of learning experiences. That's been a really positive outcome of COVID and what we've done. So now we're at a process, the point in the process where we're looking forward. I've mentioned a couple of tasks that lie in store: the mission work, the strategic planning work, the capital campaign that we have been in the quiet phase of, that we hit pause on for some time. You'll be hearing more as the board is going to do a deep dive in February into the campaign and our campaign priorities. So I hope that you'll be keenly interested in what emerges from that. There's some really exciting things percolating. So we're looking forward to January and have a big decision to make about what's going to happen in January. And we're coming back to our values to explore and examine the variables that are in play. It certainly cuts both ways. And we had a remarkably positive and successful fall. But at this juncture right now, we cannot afford to plow blindly forward without a full awareness of how the landscape of COVID has shifted over the past 5 months. And I shared this afternoon with the Board of Trustees some of the changes in the data, critically important data points with respect to COVID from July and August, when we were making decisions to come back, and then when we came back, to today, and what the projections look like as we head toward January. Those numbers are really sobering. And to compare the decision-making process that we're undergoing right now with what we were undergoing in the summer is a bit like comparing apples and oranges. The landscape has shifted that dramatically. Just one data point, when we were considering and publishing our return plan at the beginning of July, the cases per 100,000 residents of Windham County was 0.6 cases per 100,000. And today, I believe it was 78.5 or something in that neighborhood. cases per 100,000. And hospitalizations are up, rate of infection is up, ICU occupancy is up, case transmission is up. So we're having to take a long look at the viability and the safety of bringing students back. We know that when we get them here, the experience is a better one. But we are deeply concerned, not just for the student well-being, because generally speaking, students don't get hit quite as hard by COVID as older folks do. But we are concerned about the older folks. We are concerned about community spread. We are concerned about what it would mean to have a major disruption in the middle of our time back. I'm relying heavily on the professional input from our medical director, Dr. Nancy Austin, with whom I have another meeting on Thursday evening. We are talking an extensive conversation with other heads of school in Connecticut. There are a number of schools, both in Connecticut or in New England and in the Mid-Atlantic, who have already made the decision not to come back to campus until after March break. We are looking to have as much information, as much data as possible, so that we can make an informed and safe decision about what we will do in January. We know, as we said in our opening plan, that we are better together, but we also don't want to be reckless in taking unnecessary risks, because there are some failures from which you don't rebound quite as easily. So we have to be wearing our risk management hats as we go into that decision-making process. So that's a lot. It's already 10 past 8 almost, and I want to stop and make sure that we have time to answer questions. So I apologize for the rapid fire update, but I hope that gives you a little bit of sense of what has been happening at school and what we're thinking of for the future. So I'll turn it back to you, Laura.
Thanks, Tim. It's really nice to know that despite what is a particularly challenging year, that you've still seen such a myriad of successes throughout. It's really nice to be reminded of that. It looks like we've had a number of questions pop in, and we have a couple of questions from the advanced group of folks who have reached out prior to this. While we're on the topic of COVID, we may as well continue with the topic of COVID. I'm curious, well, I'm not. We have a curious parent. I am curious, but this question, I can't take credit for this question. How have you used the past 9 months of profound change in the wider world to examine, one, its impact, positive and negative, on the things that Pomfret does best and where you can make those areas even stronger? And two, how have the challenges of the past 9 months exposed weaknesses that make you want to improve upon going into this next year?
That's a great question, and I perhaps answered it partially and perhaps not very well when toward the end of my remarks. This is the time now when we're actually finding time to take a deep breath and evaluate what we've learned, what has changed in the wider world. Certainly the issues around DEIJ have impacted our thinking and our approach to the work that we're doing around social justice and inclusion at the school. Something that we've done historically, long history, not well, and then better. And better now than we've done, I think, in the past. But also, it's moved from the work around DEIJ has moved from being important to being urgent, and I think we're trying to treat it as such. And is that a weakness of our past? I think it's a historical weakness of all institutions like Pomfret School. This school was started as a school for all white males. Predominantly wealthy white males. That's how it was conceived, and that's what it was for a long time. And so we have some work to do to continue to evolve who we are institutionally to be that inclusive school that we all aim to be. So that's been, I'm not sure it's a reminder of a weakness. I would call it an opportunity that we want to build on as we move forward. I think doubling down on the idea of relationships being central to how we operate is something that we want to double down on. And Gwyneth Connell addressed that. She had to hop off to go. Speak of engagement, right now she's doing an evening class because we're still in session, and she has an evening, what we call a shadow block tonight. So Don Gibbs is our assistant head of school. Don, you were on the TABS webinar today. Is there anything you would add to that really good question about our work moving forward and lessons we've learned?
Sure, thanks, Tim. I'll try to be succinct because I know we're running short of time. But one of the big takeaways for us from the spring term of distance learning and the really aggressive ways that we tried to create opportunities for students to understand the learning objectives that were behind our teaching is that when students are made fully aware, and when we're terribly transparent about what all of our educational initiatives are directing at, students understand the journey better. They are more deeply engaged, and we can do a better job of turning the learning directly over to students so that we can simply coach and support. And now that we're back in a distance learning mode and doing things with much more synchronous contact, we're being much more agile in terms of how we spend our synchronous time and how it's designed, how we scaffold and support asynchronous moments for our students. And then we're aware, maybe better than we were before, of the incredible need for students to feel connection and relationship and support. And so one aspect of our previous distance learning model was that it was largely asynchronous, but you could have as much synchronous contact and support as possible. And I think we now know that we have to be pretty aggressive with some of our students and meet them more than halfway, that not simply wait for them to come knocking on our Zoom door, but be there as partners, because our kids crave that support, that coaching, and they need to know that they have a champion in their court.
Thanks so much for that, Don.
Thank you both. While we're on academics, we have a great question here from Alan Cobb. What role does the study of critical thinking play in Pomfret's overall approach these days, in particular as it relates to recent research in the broad spectrum of cognitive bias and the corrosive influence of algorithmic social media?
That is a big question. And I kind of wish that, and Don, I may invite you back on as the former Dean of Academics to unpack that one. Would be helpful if Gwyneth were still here. I will weigh in on the social media piece, but Don, do you want to take a crack at the first piece of that on critical thinking?
Sure. One of the things that we described in this presentation that Tim referred to that we did earlier today as an asset is that about half of our faculty had gone through Project Zero Classroom at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And one of the big ideas there is that our job as teachers is to create environments and scenarios where students can make visible their thinking and clearly articulate their reasoning behind the decisions that they make and the stances that they take, and how to get out of the way. My job as a teacher isn't for students to understand my 3 big takeaways that I've identified necessarily. My job is to create an environment where students can create takeaways, where they can battle those out, where they can marshal arguments in support of them. And I think that this is now year 20 for me at Pomfret. I think the Pomfret of today is pushing the envelope with respect to student ownership, agency, and critical thinking is at the forefront of that. You can't hide at Pomfret, either in person in our small settings or in the distance learning mode, because we're actually, as Gwyneth made mention of before, don't follow the teacher around, watch what the students are doing, because the learning is turned over to students with the added burden of defending their ideas and promoting and showcasing, making visible, if you will, that critical thinking.
Great. And Ty, you're the director of technology. I saw that you were going to answer the question about social media. Do you want to sort of share quickly some of your thoughts on the second piece of Alan's question?
Sure. I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, I taught a class, I think 3 years ago, that incorporated some social media ideas into it in terms of, things that students and us might not even know about social media, and how much our data is tracked, and how much money companies invest in getting our data and understanding what we think and what we like. And I think the cognitive bias is real. And that was especially relevant, or especially apparent, I guess, in 2016 and 2020 around the election cycles. So I think the recent research, it's real. And I think, yeah, Gwyneth, I was talking to her about this the other day too. She has a lot to add. I can probably talk to her and we can come up with a better answer, but it's definitely real.
And one thing I would add is that, one of the things that we hammer with our students is the importance of understanding sources. Where is your information coming from? How are you getting your information? How are you validating your information?
Exactly.
Do you search out? And we don't ask the question, we encourage. We first start with a question, and then we encourage them to use a multiplicity of sources and resources in their thinking, so that when they're making critical decisions, it's an informed one from a wide perspective. Helping young people navigate the biases of social media is something that we do both formally and informally at school, in the classroom certainly, and then in our co-curricular programs, particularly in our Quest program and in our 10th grade health and wellness curriculum. So there's, it's an infinitely complicated question. It's an ongoing battle that we're facing as social media increases its complexity. We feel like we're on the right path, but we also recognize that there's a great deal of work still to do.
Thanks, Tim and Ty. Tim, you spoke beautifully about Pomfret's values. We have a question here about how you came to those values. Can you speak to the process of developing those?
Sure. Yeah, we did a series of exercises that involved the Board of Trustees initially. Then went to the full faculty. Then went back to the senior administrative team, and then back to the board, and then back to the faculty, and finally we arrived at the three overarching values. And then we wanted to create some symmetry and some supporting statements. It's easy for schools to simply identify what the values are. We thought it was important, and we have posted all over campus, again, what are the supporting ways in which those values manifest? And so we took quite a bit of time, with thanks to Gary Dow, our Director of Communications, and some really good wordsmithers. And with a fairly eclectic and diverse group of people, we crafted language and asked for input from various stakeholders to shape the language so that it was reflective of who we are. And as I said, coming back to those values now, it looks like we were incredibly prescient last year when we adopted values that became critically important to us, functioning, thriving, not just surviving, but thriving during the pandemic.
Thank you. One question that we have here is in relation to the student experience, and specifically the student experience that has been lost with the sort of more remote aspect of this year. With respect to this year's freshman class, will there be some holes in their understanding of Pomfret culture? And if so, how will they be brought into the fold as things normalize? And I'll just jump in for this concerned parent and say that those of us who started sophomore year I think had a wonderful experience and did not miss a beat. So don't worry. I have a feeling your student is going to be just fine. But Tim, this is for you to answer.
Well, I think there are lots of opportunities. I'm actually going to turn the mic over to our Dean of Students, Wes Jenkins, who can speak a little bit more about this. The good news is that I wouldn't just say our freshmen, but I'd say our new students, 9th, 10th, and 11th graders, sure, they haven't seen us in full operation. They have not been able to attend a chapel service. They missed what we do in that building. They haven't seen a full school meeting. They haven't seen a full sit-down meal. They haven't seen an absolutely packed house at a volleyball game or a football game, cheering on teams, or a basketball game. Wes, but those things they haven't gone away forever. This will be back. And so, Wes, I guess I'd ask you to opine on that good question.
Sure. And I actually had the pleasure of being the freshman form dean, standing in for one of my form deans who was on maternity leave. So I spent the first 12 weeks with all of our freshmen. They are a very fun class already. And there's many things that they've enjoyed that no freshman class will ever see again, hopefully, hoping we never have another pandemic. But I think Freshman Circle has been a really lively place where our freshman class is really bonded in a way much deeper than many of the other classes. However, there are drawbacks. I mean, the drawback really is some of the restrictions to visitation between dorms has really limited their experience to really Freshman Circle in many ways, but they obviously are able to kind of dip their toes into other social settings through classes, sports, and through the areas like the TalK or the OSU. I don't think any of our students and I think this impacts all of our new students, any new student from our PGs this year all the way down to our freshmen, are not going to experience the traditional Pomfret, but they are experiencing Pomfret as creative as we can give it to them in a manner that's still teaching them our community values, particularly around community and growth. Our freshmen have done wonderfully adjusting. In fact, I'll put this stat out there. We didn't have a single freshman move to distance learning this entire fall, where other students had opted maybe due to homesickness, maybe some opportunities for athletics, opted to move to distance learning. Every single freshman on our campus remained here for the whole of the fall, which I thought was a testament to the community they were building with each other, the community built in the dorms with one another and their classrooms. They were excited to be here. Obviously, you get a little touch of cabin fever after 10 or 11 weeks in those house dorms. And I'm sure there's definitely always a little social drama in a private school dorm. And this year was no different, but they also worked through that with maturity and poise. And then most importantly, we've established 3 really strong form senators as freshmen who've already taken up the mantle and have worked with our president and vice president, class vice president and class president. And it was really awesome because they threw a really, really cool get together right before we left. And even though it was the coldest night we've seen in the fall, I had 50 freshmen, both boarders and day, outside, bundled up at 3 different campfires, enjoying calzones and company with one another. And so I think there's a lot to say in that, but I do agree that there is something missing, and hopefully, those freshmen returning will get a first taste of those traditions along with all the other new students.
The great thing is that they seem to have, for the most part, loved it in this version, which was pretty remarkable. And I just kept on telling new students, if you like it now, you're going to love it when we get back to normal, right? And I can't wait to get back to normal. I can't wait to get back to chapel. And so, and here's for me has been the greatest downside. Every single year of my tenure, I have gotten to know every student's name by the end of September. And how do I do that? I do that by being able to identify a face. Well, they're behind masks. 100 or 98% of the time I see them. And for the first time in 10 years, I don't know every single student's name to a face because I haven't had an opportunity to see every student's face. And I have my Facebook and I have studied it and I've looked at the names. But if there's one thing that I'm desperate for, it's for that human connection and that smile. And so as well as the masks have prevented illness from spreading on campus and protected us even from colds and flu, we had virtually no colds this fall, which is pretty unusual. I can't wait to get back to seeing the smiling face and the laughing faces on our students. So something to look forward to, and something I'm bullish is coming our way in the not too distant future. So
Thank you. I have one last question for you before we wrap up. I am curious what we alumni on this panel can do to help you during this unusual time.
Spread the love for Pomfret School. You and current satisfied parents are our best capital in building more relationships with people outside who may want to come to the school. So I've always thought that if you can make a single referral to Pomfret School for a student who matriculates here, who wouldn't have matriculated had you not directed them to Pomfret, you've just made an extraordinary gift to Pomfret School. So, I encourage you to stay connected with the school, to offer us your input, to build connections outside of the school, to support one another, to refer people to us, to support us financially when you can and to the extent that you can, so that we can continue to build on our successes in ways that can only happen when we get the financial support to do so. But if I could ask one thing, it would be to be loud and proud about your affiliation with this remarkable school, and share that love around, spread the good word, and help us keep the school full of terrific kids and wonderful families.
Well, after hearing all of this tonight, that shouldn't be hard to do. We're almost out of time, and I have a comment that came in from Calhoun Wick that I'd like to read because I echo its sentiments entirely. He writes, "Not a question, but an observation. I'm incredibly impressed and appreciative with all Pomfret has done and is doing." And I think I speak on behalf of the majority, if not all of the alumni, that we are incredibly lucky to have the leadership at Pomfret that we have at the moment, and to be a part of such a wonderful and warm community. I know we didn't get every question answered tonight, though I think we've been pretty close. And I hope that if you have further comments or questions, you will feel comfortable reaching out to anyone on this panel. I know that they would love to hear from you. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tim for the final word.
Well, thank you. And thank you for that nice vote of support for the leadership. And I want to be explicit that the leadership here is not me. It's an exceptional team of administrators and faculty members who make this work. And I'm humbled to work alongside some pretty amazing people. And every day I wake up and I know how fortunate I am. So just in closing, back on Family Weekend, and then on other Zoom talks I've had, I shared, or I reminded some people and shared with others that once upon a time I was a French teacher and a big fan of Victor Hugo, and he wrote some words in Les Miserables, one of his really his most famous pieces. There's a line from that work. In French, it goes, "Même la nuit la plus sombre prendra fin et le soleil se lèvera," which means in translation, even the darkest night will end and the sun will rise. And the number of times that I've come back to that statement this fall, reminding myself that brighter days are coming, is pretty high, maybe pretty much on a daily basis. And I keep coming back to those words. And every time I see the light in a student's eyes or the dedication of a faculty member, I'm reminded of the power of that sun rising in the darkness that has been, in many ways, so palpable this year. But we can all see the end coming. that the dark night of this pandemic is going to end, and it's going to end sooner rather than later. And when it does, our community and this school will be a better and healthier and stronger community and school, I think, than it's ever been before. And I do believe that next year will be the greatest year that Pomfret School has ever had. And I want to thank one and all, both my fellow panelists for joining, Laura for moderating, Will for playing host, and to all of you alums and parents who have joined us tonight. My deep gratitude, my best wishes to you all at the holiday season. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to seeing you again, perhaps in person in 2021. So thanks so much.